Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. It's time to remember this crap with Mike Donahue. Mike, how are you?
Terrific. How are you, Andy?
Oh, I'm great. We're recording this the night before the Cubs Field of Dreams game, and I can't wait. It's going to be the greatest thing ever.
You raised a question, I think, on your podcast with Dave, and I haven't looked, but I don't I know I watched some of the game last year. Is there an outfield fence?
There is.
There has to be, of course, right? Okay.
I was looking, because I was serious. I didn't watch. I wanted to watch a little bit of the game last year just for the novelty of it, but the White Sox were in, so I really didn't want to watch that much. And
True.
I think the fence is like low. Like I'm envisioning like Seiya running into it and breaking both of his kneecaps,
Oh,
Wendell Davis style.
let's recreate the
Now,
Bill
did you
Miller.
know that Frank Thomas owns that stadium?
No. How do you mean?
He and some investors bought it last year. Now
The
they don't
stadium
own
itself?
they don't own the
The
tourist trap
property.
250 yards to the east. The thing I've been to. You ever been there to Field Dreams?
Yes, not,
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about it. 1996, talk about a motley crew. My older brother, my dad, and my brother's 4-year-old son thought it'd be a good idea to drive out to Platteville. We
Oh
stayed in
yeah.
Dubuque. Yeah, we watched some Dave Wannstedt Bears, and then on the way home, we realized we weren't too far from
No, you're not.
Dyersville. So yeah, had a catch, played catch with my dad. Did all that, hit checked all the boxes. But yeah, I was there, I guess 26 years ago. Um,
I didn't even
I only-
realize until I was thinking back the fact that the movie came out in '89 and I was there in '90 the first time.
right. Well, when you told that story, like your dad couldn't wait. Your dad was like almost a Field of Dreams hipster. He couldn't wait to, right? You went to Rushmore. You said the next year. So I mean, that probably
No,
was.
we went to Field of Dreams. Yeah, right. We went to Field of Dreams on both ends of that.
I know.
Going
So
out
I've
and
only been
coming
there.
back.
I've only been there half as many
I
times
remember
as you.
I've been there three
Hmm.
times.
A third, right? Because you
Yeah,
went from an NIU
with my
buddy.
buddy Wheels. We went
Mm.
and yeah, we were hammered. But that was a long day. I think did we go to Playville too? I think we did. I'm pretty sure
I
that
mean,
was what we did. We went from how about this? He came up to Rockford. He lived in did he live in Palos or Orland
that's
Park?
a haul.
He lived in Orland Park.
I was got those.
He came out to
too.
Rockford, and we went up to see the Bears. Then we went to morning practice with the Bears. Then we drove over to Dyersville.
Mm-hmm.
So went to morning practice, went to the Hoist House in Platteville, had a couple of beers,
Mm.
hopped in the car, drove, sped through Cuba City, where my dad once got two speeding tickets on the way to and from Platteville. That was fun.
Ooh, ouch.
Um, to see my brother pitch in a University of Wisconsin Platteville game that he didn't pitch in.
Yeah, so it really cost him.
Yeah, Dad was really excited about that. But then we went out to Dyersville, did that, and then drove all the way back across to Janesville, Wisconsin,
Oh, you go
to
to
the Rock
KKK
County
rally?
Fair, and I
Okay.
think we saw what awful country act was there? Brooks and Dunn, I think, was there.
Well, I got to tell you, this is just some true
That was quite a
Midwestern
day.
Americana here. You're hitting all the spots.
Football training camp, a baseball tourist trap, and a county fair.
Cornfield, right? And Janesville, Janesville, of course, the town where Geraldo Rivera got attacked by the KKK, I believe.
Yep,
They were
that's exactly right. That's
sta-
still on the sign when you drive in.
yeah. And
Holmes,
also,
they have a picture of Geraldo being hit.
I believe, yeah, the esteemed former vice presidential candidate Paul Ryan, I believe, also hails from Janesville.
Yeah, well, he still lives there, and I know people who work at the college there, the community college, and they don't like Paul Ryan. Maybe it's not a big deal anymore that he's not a congressman, but when he was a congressman, he would just call up all of a sudden and say, "I need to use your conference center for an event," and they're like, "Okay, when? Today." And
Sounds
when he was Speaker of the House, so a whole bunch of security had to come first.
yes,
And they were
detail.
just like, buddy, we're trying to run a fucking business here.
Yeah, sounds about right.
He's like, oh, I've got to go do, I got to do P90X for 2 hours before. Then I'll be right over.
Ah, Janesville.
Yeah, Janesville. That's a good fair. I highly recommend the Rock County Fair. It's a good fair.
Our whole triangulation didn't involve Janesville, but it was we stayed in Dubuque, so we did hit the casino in Dubuque as part of our. So it was Platteville, Dubuque Casino, and then Dyersville.
A few years later, I went to the Rock County Fair with my then girlfriend, and we weren't there to see anybody in particular. We just went up. Figured what the hell? It's not that far from Rockford. I had been telling her, hey, if we're ever going to go to a fair, the Rock County Fair is a good fair.
Oh.
So we go up there, and we're doing the fair stuff. And I believe I was eating gator tail. I don't think it's a Rock County Fair. It was actual alligator. It was probably...
So 1,300 miles from Florida.
Probably rat. But I got to try this. And Waylon Jennings.
Probably rat.
Waylon Jennings was the act, and we weren't in the... We could hear him, obviously, because it's fair. It's not that far. We could hear Waylon, but we weren't at the grandstand watching him. And we were sitting there, and I said to her, I'm like, I was joking. I said, we're going to sit here. We're waiting until he plays the Dukes of Hazzard theme song.
It's the good old boys.
And she's like, he's not going to play the theme song from a TV show. And it was the next song.
Nice.
He started up with, just a good old boys. And the place went, we hadn't heard the crowd hardly, and I went nuts. Just
That's
crazy.
Hilarious.
For him to sing the Dukes of Hazzard theme song. So he got all those gold records, and that's the one everybody was there for. So
yeah, such is life. That's good.
Yeah, so people, I don't know how you could have avoided it, but there is a Field of Dreams movie deep dive podcast that's up now with Mike Terry.
It's very good.
I got deeply into the agronomics of the whole thing, and then I couldn't help myself. Dave Brown and I talked about it on the baseball podcast, so you can hear it on both or either.
Hey, it's Field of Dreams week, kids.
It is. It's the last non-deadly dull thing the Cubs are going to do for years.
You're pretty sure about that, right?
I guess until they go to London next year. And
no September call-ups, right? Because Brennan Davis crashed that.
You get to call up 2 people, right?
Rosters
go to 28. They don't go to 40 anymore. Yeah, everybody's clamoring for the great Matt Mervis. And he's not coming up. Because he does not have to be on the 40-man roster this winter. And if they call him out, they got to put him on the 40-man roster. And even for the Cubs, that would be dumb. So they're not going to do that. So
right, even for Carter Kelly or whatever that guy's name is.
Well,
Hawkins.
Bort and Matt Clapp were conversing on the Twitters today about the roster crunch the Cubs are going to have with the 40-man. And I'm just thinking, guys, there's a lot of dead weight on that 40-man roster. And I counted 10 guys that they just do not need to protect. They don't need to bring back. I'm no mathematician. That's 25% of that 40-man that you can just be like, you know what? If anybody wants any of you, just go away. They're all going to be back. They'll drop them all off, and nobody's picking up any of those assholes. It's Frank Schwindel and Rafael Ortega and Mark Leonard Jr.
Yeah, they should
worse guys than that even. I'm just like,
they don't need to be on the 40-man. If anything, they can come crawling back for a minor league contract next year.
Most of them will, unless the Cubs decide they don't want him back. Jason Hayward will not be on the 40-man. We know that. Jed announced it. So.
Yeah, I was impressed they announced it. 16 months ahead of the expiration of the contract.
Well, I didn't realize this. I thought it was funny. So you see that clip, and then the next day the Cubs tweet out, "Happy birthday, Jason Hayward."
That's brutal.
And Gittles is like, "Hey, what better birthday present than getting paid $30 million to not play for the Cubs?"
Goddamn right.
Like, yeah, you're not wrong.
Chuck is right for once.
Maybe that was stop clock, all that stuff.
Right, blind squirrel.
All right, well, we're not supposed to be remembering this kind of crap. We're supposed to be remembering slightly older crap. We have 5 years left on the wheel of crap.
27 down. Then there were 5 to go.
We got 1 from the 80s, 1 from the 90s, 2 from the aughts.
2 from the 80s, 84, 87. And
that's right, 84, 87. There's 5.
93, 2 from the aughts. 2
80s, a 90s, and 2 aughts.
I will like to have any listeners know in advance that 2 of the 5 remaining seasons are dusty seasons. So I'm not calling DraftKings.
I love to talk about Johnny B. Baker Jr. as much as possible.
Oh, we might get our chance tonight. We'll see.
Yeah, well, it has a pretty decent chance. Oh, I can't spin it there.
Oh, barely. Okay.
1993. The Cubs managed. Well, I don't want to step on your 5 fun
That's
facts.
all right.
But this is a Jim Lefebvre.
That's right.
Season.
The first Cubs team in our lifetime, Andy, to finish 500 and not make the playoffs. Opening day starter, Mike Morgan. Interestingly, his counterpart in the other dugout was Greag Maddux.
How'd that go?
I think we should probably look at that game. It was pretty.
I accidentally typed in 1883. Should we talk about the Chicago White Stockings instead?
Is there a John Clarkson, Mike King Kelly showdown?
Well, yeah, King Kelly, Cap Anson, the catcher. Maybe we always talk about how Wilson's the best catcher since Gabby Hartnett.
Yes,
was Gabby Hartnett better than 1883 catcher Silver Flint?
Wow, that sounds like razor shines.
And then, of course, my favorite all-time Cub, Abner Dalrymple.
Of course,
Abner hit 298 for the 1883.
That is absolutely such a 19th century baseball-y name. I love it.
They were 59, 39, and 0, and they finished second in the National League, behind the Boston Beaneaters.
Oh well, there you go.
There you go. There's your 1883 Cub. Remember this crap.
Resuming the 5 fast number 3, opening day second baseman was not Ryne Sandberg, because after becoming the highest paid player in baseball, surpassing Bobby Bonilla, Sandberg had his wrist broken on the first pitch of spring training. A couple more fun facts from 1993. Steve Traxel made his debut in September, instantly reminding fans of the recently departed Scott Sanderson. And last fact, 1993 was Randy Myers' first year at the Cubs. He saved 53 games, I think, setting an NL record. And on which we should probably try to find this game because it's just funny. But on Randy Myers' Day, my brother Brian Donahue will tell you that as a patron in the first row, the left field bleachers, he was the first to throw his Randy Myers poster onto the field on Randy Myers' Day when Randy Myers blew the save in the 9th inning. Some game. Somewhere it couldn't have been too hard to find because Randy Myers was pretty nails. So Cubs are 500, but legit not a playoff contender, and a lot of other things. Early year 2 of mediocrity by design. They were charting that course to fill that ballpark and have a team that was going to win 75 games and maybe more. In 93, they did. They did it to try to save Jim Lefebvre's job, and it didn't even matter.
So, I was thinking this would have been in the era when I always went to the old style opener, but I know I didn't go to this one.
Well, we talked about this.
Right.
There was a kind of confusion because you brought it up thinking Willie Wilson hit a triple.
Right. I had an acid flashback where
it was
a game where Willie Wilson and Deion Sanders both tripled in the same game, and it's never happened.
It could be Mandela. It might have. Yeah, I've had that. Even that. It's possible. If you went to the Budweiser home opener, you would have gone to the third game probably because you'd remember if you were at Jose Guzman.
I know I didn't go that time because that was the Jose Guzman flirt with history.
Yep, and that's probably a good jumping off point because going into the season, of course, it was just almost too perfect that they were playing the Braves and their new free agent signee. Greag Maddux. We've spilled a lot of verbal ink on Maddux, of course, justifiably because it's just such a historic.
He got booed.
Colossal. We were all so just to provide some quick context. We've talked 92. We've talked about it in other seasons. Maddux was the reigning Cy Young Award winner for the Cubs. But this was shortly after that period of time when Jim Frey, to cover his ass for a team that he was just basically peeling off, was allowed to go to market, and when he picked up Danny Jackson and Dave Smith and George Bell, and it pretty much blew up in his face. It cost him his job, and that's what I come back to when I refer to Tribune Company changing gears and taking a more cautious approach. And I think maybe not directly, but I think there certainly was a little bit of the context behind the Maddux negotiations. So they bring in Larry Himes, of course, to replace Jim Frey. And Larry Himes had built the nucleus of a Sox team that at this point in time would go on to win the American League West their first playoff appearance in 10 years, and the nucleus of Jack McDowell and Robin Ventura and Frank Thomas and Alex Fernandez that were 4 successive first-round draft picks from 87 through 90 when Jim Fry was, drafting the likes of Ty Griffin and Earl Cunningham and Lance Dixon. So, but Himes was such a prick, of course. We've covered it. He gets run out of the South Side, and after Fry, blows through all of his bullets, the Cubs think they can get one over, and they hire Himes. And in '92, Himes brings along Sosa. He flipped Bell. They were a decidedly mediocre team, but they had a Cy Young winner, and they let him walk. And I think it was more of a Stanton Cook decision than a Larry Himes decision. It was definitely a Tribune decision. It really sort of strikes at the heart of where they were going. But the whole laughable thing was Larry Himes being forced to, he was kind of being pushed out in front of the media to justify the off season in which they let the reigning Cy Young Award winner go. And Himes, of course, infamously put it in terms of just pure quantity without any attributes to value when he said, well, we took this pot of money that we could have given Greag Maddux for one player, and instead we distributed it amongst Willie Wilson and Dan Plesac and Randy Myers and Candy Maldonado. And so it was almost like this sort of Phil Rogers +1. It was just so illogical. Yeah, it was just bad. So that's all going on. Another thing that happens was that Sandberg, who had been made the highest paid player, and so he's at his peak. We've covered some recent peak Sandberg.
And that was what, like $7 million a year, I think?
I think that's right. Interestingly enough, when he surpassed Bobby Bonilla, that is a different Bobby Bonilla contract than the one that gets celebrated every year now. But Bobby was the highest paid player when the Mets pried him away from the Pirates around the time that they were dismantling and the Giants took Bonds from Pittsburgh. But Sandberg briefly was the highest paid player. I'm sure Bonds passed him up after or whatever. I don't know how it all shook out, but he was at his peak. And Sandberg, always the stooge, really, although he rarely spoke, I really remember in the off season, like in December, where he came out and he blasted Maddux, which in retrospect, embarrassing. It was dumb. He was put up to it. He maybe things were miscommunicated. I remember. So you're right. Maddux was booed because at the time, the narrative was that ungrateful little prick, he left us, he snubbed us. And so sure enough, the schedule makers just by chance had scheduled the Braves to open the season in Chicago. And who better to start the season for the Braves than their newly acquired Cy Young Award winner? It had to be at Wrigley Field. I think it was an incredibly gutsy performance by Maddux in retrospect, even though the Cubs were soft, but it was quite a memorable opening day, really, when you factor in all of that shit I was just talking about.
Ryne Sandberg became the highest paid player in baseball when he signed. How many years? He signed a 4-year, $28.4 million contract.
Effective beginning that year.
Yeah, I don't get it. So Bobby Bonilla never got to play a game as baseball's highest paid player. Bonilla has a contract with the Mets that will pay him, I got it, $29 million over 5 years.
Oh, okay. So he had signed that before Sandberg. So
Bonilla's annual value was $5.8 million.
Yeah.
Ryne's was 7.1.
Because Bonilla's signed before Sandberg. So I remember the question was, conversations were being had in taverns and between sons and fathers. Is he worth more than Bobby Bonilla? Cubs said yes. Which is funny. I mean, even though I just talked about Tribune pulling back the reins, part of that philosophy is you always have to keep one or two show ponies.
Yeah.
Sandberg
Well,
was
the Cubs chose to pay their 32-year-old second baseman instead of their 26-year-old.
Well, it's another way of looking at it. It should not have had to have been an either or, though.
Well, it's just like that's been the Cubs forever. We can't afford it. No, you choose not to. You certainly can.
Exactly.
So.
And then, of course, Sandberg, in the very first spring training game, Mike Jackson, a little wild, throws high and tight and breaks his goddamn wrist. So it's just, kind of a bad feeling going in. So Sandberg would be sidelined to start the year. And I think that ended peak Sandberg. I think we've kind of already sort of provided that autopsy.
Though, I think I'm going to defend Stanton Cook here.
Oh.
So Greag Maddux, in that first year, 1993, Yeah, he won 20 games. He had a 2.36 ERA, and he threw 8 complete games, and he struck out 197. He walked 52. But he lost.
But
Get this: he lost 10 games on a team that only lost 58.
wow, no kidding.
He lost almost 20% of their games.
Yeah, certainly over 15. That's not acceptable.
That's not good. Now, Tom Glavine lost 11. It's kind of interesting actually to see that. The bullpen not losing a lot of games apparently, but yeah. No, Smoltz lost 11. Smoltz and Maddux combined to lose 21 of their 58 losses. Yeah, that was a Braves team. That Braves team wasn't very good. They only won 104 games. They only won the National League West by 1 game. How good could they be?
Yeah, it's considered the last great pennant race, 1993. Last season of the 4-division format, no wild cards, 2 playoff teams, division winners only.
It really is, it's another case of Dusty. It's literally just think about what terrible luck that is. It's the best Giant team he ever managed, even the one that went to the World Series.
They had 2 20-game winners, right?
They
Billy
won
Swift and John
103
Burkett.
games, and they don't make the playoffs. you just go home.
And they didn't fade really either. They won 103 games. You don't fade when you win 103. They just the Braves got hotter than shit. They acquired McGriff. The press box blew up, and then they took off.
Yeah, the 93 Giants had Billy Swift and John Burkett each won 20 games.
No.
The shooter, Rod Beck.
Rod Beck was saving their games.
48 saves. And let's see how they finished here.
I remember the Cubs playing the Giants around 4th of July that year. I was coming back from Wisconsin, and first base umpire Lee Wire. I don't know if you remember that name.
Oh, yeah.
But he died that weekend, right after a Cubs game. Fun fact. There were a few umpires that died. You know, John McSherry, Dick Stello, died in their prime while they're still working.
Well, there are a lot of fat guys.
Well, McSherry was. Lee Wire may have been. I don't know about Dick Stello. Dick Stello got crushed by a car.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's bad.
It happens.
Well, here's the interesting thing. So the Giants they were up 2.5 games on the 7th of September, and they lost.
You think so?
They lost 8 in a row, including a sweep at home to the Cubs.
I don't even remember that.
Where the winning pitchers were the illustrious trio of Greg Hibbard, Jose Bautista, who beat Jim Deshaies. I remember Deshaies talking about he got traded by the Twins to the Giants just in September. It was like a waiver. It was like a waiver deal, and he got lit up in this game at the Cubs. He lost 8-1.
Oh no, poor Jim.
And then Mike Morgan, and they went from 2.5 up to 3.5 out by the end of that Cubs sweep.
Wow, Cubs really fucked Dusty's shit up.
And that was a hotter. But how about this? Then they won 12 of their last 14 games and lost the division by a game. The Cubs. It was the Cubs that cost Dusty a chance to go to the playoffs.
I never knew that. I don't remember that. We'd gone back to school. You and I both were in DeKalb that fall. It was my senior year. All I remember is that they were a typically humdrum, mediocre team all year, and then they were hotter than shit in September because they wanted to save Jim Lefebvre's job. The only other thing I remember about September was a young Sammy Sosa, who would, in fact, become the first ever Cub to have a 30-30 season in this year, was loudly criticized by Ron Santo on the radio in September for the Cubs are not in a pennant race, though. That's not there's not even like it was in 95 where they really were, at least for that last week. They never really were. So not to justify that or just dismiss Santo's old man on a porch, but he was pretty vocal blasting Sammy for being selfish and going for 30-30. But Sammy would get there. So nice season by Samuel Peralta. But yeah, the September Cubs are hot. So wrong team for Dusty's Giants to face when they
yeah, and one last thing about the about this Giants and Dodgers thing, or Giants and Braves thing.
Braves.
The Giants moved into a tie for first on Thursday, September 30th. with a win over the Dodgers. So they were tied. That was the first of a 4-game series against the Dodgers. They would win the next game 8-7 and the Saturday game 5-3. So they were going into the final day of the season. The Braves and the Giants were tied at 103 and 58.
And the Giants, the Giants sent out the pitch that day?
Yes, they sent out rookie
Solomon
Torres,
who 11 years later would shatter Sammy Sosa's helmet in Pittsburgh.
And Solomon didn't make it through the fourth.
And the other thing about that was that I believe Atlanta became the first team ever in either divisional or pre-divisional play to sweep a season series because they finished off a sweep of the Rockies. They never lost to the Rockies, I want to say, in the Rockies. So they had the Rockies just beaten the Braves one time. And Dusty's Dusty's buddy Groove Baylor. And the first year Rockies won just one game from the Braves.
They were 13-0 against the Rockies. They outscored 106-50 in 13 games.
Hey man, when you're at the top of your league, that's what you do to expansion teams.
Giants 10-3 against the Rockies.
Yeah,
6-6 against the Cubs. That always cracks me up that was the old balanced schedule. You were playing teams in the other division as much as you were playing. They played the Rockies 13 times, and they played the Cubs 12 times. This
is the first year of the Rockies and Marlins being in the league, so it was a little bit uneven. For years, from 69 until the year before, it was play your own division 18 times, 9 at home and on the road, and play the other division 12 times, 6-6. But with the Rockies and Marlins joining, that's why you have an odd number of 13. That was the first.
Next year, 2023, every team is going to play every team in baseball.
Wow. Okay.
The Cubs will play every American League team, either home or away. And they will only play the White Sox once. I mean, one series. I'd be fine with one game.
Oh, it's somewhere Uncle Jerry weeps.
Yeah, because if every other year, that's 3 sellouts.
He's
the reason they went back to the 2. He bitched about it so much.
Going back to the 2. They originally was only one. It was one series.
Right, but didn't they switch back to 1? And then
I don't know. I just know that he hung on to the 2 series like a dog on a bone because he needed those 3 games. Yeah. The Phillies won the Cubs division that year, and then they upset the Braves in the playoffs. But you might remember an early season series against the Cubs got off to like a rocky start. Braves take 2 out of 3, whatever. But at one point early on, I remember a series where they beat ace Terry Mulholland on Friday. And then Friday night, I went out with a roommate of mine in DeKalb, and I believe we went to Lord Stanley's. I can't remember. And the band that was playing was called the Foot Stompers, just a regular old timer band, whatever. We were just looking for cheap beer. And they had a dance contest for 2 Cubs tickets. And my drunk ass danced by myself and won the tickets.
Wow.
So, yeah, my dad came and got me the next morning and went to the game. And I remember Dwight Smith hit a homer. Dwight Smith, by the way, we'll come back to it, ended up being the primary center fielder in 93, which was really chock full of laughter. But I just going to this series to say when the Cubs had a chance to go for a sweep against the eventual pennant-winning Phillies, the Sunday game they were losing. And the one good thing that Candy Maldonado did in the Cubs uniform, some fans might remember this. Us as fans sometimes just remember very weird things. Former Cub Mitch Williams, much discussed on this podcast, who had he rebounded after bottoming out, and Jim Fry getting pennies on the dollar for him, and Bob Scanlon and Chuck McElroy. The Phillies were off to a hot start. Williams was off to a good start. The Cubs then stopped them cold and took the first 2 games. And then on Sunday, with 2 outs, I'm pretty sure, former Cub Mitch Williams going for a save, served up a cookie to Candy Maldonado, who had started the season 1 for 9. He was terrible at the beginning. He hit that homer. So, a respite. And then he went back to sucking before getting traded for Glenn Allen Hill to finish one on that when the Cubs did not complete the sweep of the Phillies. They lost in extras. And, just one of the few pointless high.
The Cubs were down 8-4 going into the 9th. and former Cy Young Award winner Mark Davis, not Raiders owner Mark Davis, former Padres Cy Young Award winner Mark Davis, was pitching. And Derek May hit a double. Sammy popped out. The beautiful, luscious curls of Steve Buechele drew a walk. So I had to bring old Jim Fregosi had to come bring Mitch Williams in. And Tommy Shields singled. That loaded the bases for Matt Walbeck. Matt grounded out to the pitcher, which scored Derek May.
Matt Walbeck with backup catcher that would get traded for Willie Banks. Sorry.
And then on a 1-0 pitch, Candy Maldonado parked a 3-run homer off Mitch Williams to tie it. And then, here's some managing, Jim Lefebvre. Who came up to bat with the game tied and 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th?
Mitch Williams?
No. He was pitching for the... He was pitching...
I'm sorry, duh. No, I'm sorry.
It's just... They got him for this guy, right?
Chuck McElroy?
It was Chuck McElroy batted for himself and struck out. Nobody left on the bench? Nobody? Well, Chuck had to pitch the top of the 10th, and he got through it 1-2-3. Mitch pitched the 10th. The Cubs had, of course, Ryne Sanchez singled. He got bunted to second by Grace. There's some questionable managing. Derek Mace struck out. Wild pitch with Sammy up puts Ryne Sanchez on third. Cub crowd going nuts. Sammy, all he's got to do is get a hit, and the Cubs sweep, and Sammy grounded out to third. Oh, the things you find out. Then in the top of the 11th, the Phillies rallied off of Bob Scanlon.
The other guy
Mitch traded Williams. For Chuck McElroy.
Yep. Right.
And
traded with Chuck McElroy for Mitch Williams, yeah.
Dave Hollins hit a 3-run homer to make it 11-8.
Yep.
And in the bottom of the 11th, Matt Walbeck hit a 2-run homer.
Oh, too little, too late.
So, okay, how about this? Jesus. How many guys do they have on their bench? 1? Walbeck hits the homer, cuts it to a 1-run. Candy Maldonado singles. And who pinch hits for Bob Scanlon? Randy Myers.
Ooh. Wow.
And Randy grounds into a double play.
Wow.
That's one of those where, Brenly was a little tedious sometimes. But if you feel like you're going to hit a double play, just strike out.
Yeah.
That would have been advised for Randy to have simply struck out and had Dwight Smith come up with a chance to tie it or win it.
So Randy Myers is in the first year of his new deal, and like in his third week, he's asked to pinch hit next inning. So things are going great.
Yep.
And of course, Myers himself was, as you once pointed out, when I was going to claim that they didn't sign anybody between the George Bell, Jackson Smith, and Alfonso Soriano. They did, but they had to sign that. That wasn't spending. That was just filling some of the void that not spending on Maddux did. But it was a big deal, and he actually was worth it. And still fun. But he was basically also he was correcting the mistake that was Mitch Williams, which was correcting the mistake that was trading Lee Smith. I mean, it was, in a sense, it was still a sort of a cascading continuation of Jim Fry's original sin. So.
Randy Myers batted twice that season. In his other at bat, he had a 2-run double.
Excellent.
So I guess Lefebvre at least picked the right guy. It just didn't work out. Randy Myers 53 saves.
Yeah, he only blew 3. I know he blew 1 to the Giants in late May. Kurt Manwaring tied it up.
Is that the Cubs' record?
It would probably have to be,
Can't
right?
Be. I don't know anybody else has 50.
I'm not going to look.
Ryan Dempster get 50 saves?
Yeah, in not in one season, clearly.
No, yeah. Well, Crane Kennedy, he's the only pitcher ever to win 50 games.
I know.
50 saves for the Cubs. As if that's a fucking thing. It's not.
It's ridiculous.
How about this? Not only is Randy Myers have the single season record, He's also number 2.
All time?
In 93, he had 53 saves. In 95, he had
Oh,
38. Bruce Sutter had 37. Lee Smith, 36. And Mitch Williams, 36. Oh, it looks like we're missing. Wait a minute. We're missing some rows here. Maybe he's not first and second.
I don't know if anyone saved 40 for the Cubs. We've had good closers. I don't think Lee ever got to 40.
Oh, there's one other guy who had 50. So that was misleading. Yes. Randy Myers, 53. Rod Beck had 51 in 98.
Oh, fuck, in 98. That's right. Yeah.
And Marmol and Randy Myers had 38. Marmol's was in 2010. And Bruce
so
Myers
is first and third.
Yeah.
And then 95 season was strike short, so he would have had 40 probably.
Cubs have had, tied for 10th. The Cubs have 5 guys tied for 10th most. It's an illustrious group. Joe Borowski, Ryan Dempster, Kevin Greag, and then 2 years of Lee Smith, 84 and 85. Lee's on here 1, 2, 3, just 3 times. Marmol's on it twice. Sutter's only on it once because it was a different time. Mitch is on it. All the greats.
Speaking of Lee Smith, I mean, we're now, 6 years removed from him being gone. He's still mowing them down.
Yeah.
There is a song.
So washed up, he's still leading the league in saves.
My brother used to tell me about a song that some garage band had put together about when the Cubs, it was just riffing on the guitar, like when the Cubs win the World Series, and they had a whole bunch of different lines. It was Lee Smith will still be pitching, and the song was made like in 1993, 2. It was already like, wow, Lee Smith is still going strong. It definitely was, just not with the Cubs.
So Willie Wilson played 105 games. He hit 258 with a 301 on base.
301, huh?
7 stolen bases. He was 37 years old. That was a good idea. So I guess that would be why Dwight played. Dwight, how about this?
Yes.
Other than the fact that he, was a terrible outfielder. And he was 29 years old, and he hit 300 on the dot with a 355 on base and a 494 slugging.
He was,
that's perfectly acceptable. Keep running that out there.
He was always just a fun left-handed hitter to watch. The thing about Dwight Smith, and we've talked about him, he recently died, and we talked about him because the wheel fell in 1990 last time. He and even in 88 when he led Pittsfield in hitting, but he was fun. He was the runner-up rookie of the year in 89. The thing is, he could hit. He had a sweet swing, and he could hit. He was just a good hitter, and he was fast as hell. But it didn't matter because he was just an atrocious base runner too. Yeah. So, and the speed didn't help him in the outfield because he didn't have range. He couldn't read a ball off the bat. But because he did have like raw speed, they put him in center, and he ended up. So I see on Baseball Reference, Willie Wilson apparently is deemed a center fielder, and that's fine. But I just remember it feeling like early in the year and for most of the year, Smith kind of just took over center. It was almost like, well, this ragtag fantasy team that we slapped together that's very ill-fitting, I guess you might as well. You got to get Smith in the lineup. So, as you said, he only had 343 plate appearances, but he did have more than Willie, and he got a lot more games in center than you might think. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's probably a problem.
Yeah. Well, there's another guy who got some run in center field that year, and he hit 288, 413 on base, 538 slugging. He's probably a little bit better remembered for what he did on opening day a year later.
Oh yeah,
Carl Tuffy Rhodes.
He was a late
Cubs in '93.
Late '93 because he was a deadline deal. The Cubs finally gave up on, not gave up. They got a lot of use out of Paul Assenmacher. They acquired Assenmacher himself as contenders down the stretch in '89, and he was an innings eater. So he was a pretty regular presence in the early '90s. And the Cubs flipped him to a team that could use him in the playoffs and got Rhodes late in the season before becoming, this also addresses, Andy, the whole like void in center field that we've danced around, talked about, and decided we're going to have to do a separate episode on that alone. You got Willie Wilson in '93, ends up being Dwight Smith. You patch Tuffy Rhodes, before a rare string of consistency, which would be the 3 years of Brian McRae. But I mean, 93 really is really speaks to the whole, among other things, the absolute black hole in center field, 100%.
The 93, the Cubs, I was just looking at their starting pitching. They had 4 guys who won. Oh, I didn't go far enough yet.
Yeah, I saw
4
Greg
guys
Hibbard's name.
with double. Yeah, I want to talk about Greg Hibbard. I remember it was a big deal at the time, and it was supposed to be fixed with Danny Jackson. The Cubs hadn't had a left-handed starting pitcher. They had Trout. And then after Hibbard, they went through another like ridiculously long drought.
So speaking of center fielder, so you're going back to really Kenny Holtzman or something, right. Probably.
So Larry brought Hibbard with him, basically, from the White Sox.
Another former White Sox.
And Hibbard led them in wins. He's 15-11 with a 3.96.
Yeah, 15. I just remember Hibbard had a nice year. He was kind of a young White Sox that came up around the time of McDowell and that team, and then Sox got better and he was disposable. But he's another find that Larry Himes, like you said, brought over. And I had forgotten that. Yeah, he became a noteworthy lefty because Steve Trout really only had 84 in parts of other seasons. And
so, if you're wondering why, so let's see, Hibbard, how long did he pitch for the White Sox? Not as long as you think, but 1, 2, 3, 4 years. He had won 14, 11, and then 10 games for the White Sox. And he was suddenly available to the Cubs because the White Sox lost him in the expansion draft to the Marlins. And the Cubs traded for him. And wait till you hear who they traded for him. Because the Marlins were loading up, not just Alex Arias. That wasn't enough. Gary Scott.
Oh, hey. So that's the end. So wait, both Gary Scott and Kevin Ory were ultimately traded to the Marlins at the end. How about that?
I got a pretty good idea Patrick Wisdom will be playing for the Marlins at some point. So it's
okay.
It's a thing. It's a trend.
That's fine.
Yeah, the only one of the regular starters to not win double digits was Frank Castillo. He was only 5-8 in 25 starts.
So, yeah, Castillo came up and had a really strong 92. He was during Maddux's Cy Young season in which, Morgan was sort of was able to buttress with a 16-win season. Castillo, the young buck, won 10 or 11 games, had some big ones, when they were still sort of staying alive, and a bit of a regression, I guess, in 93.
One of my favorite Cub pitchers of the 90s won 10 games pitching predominantly out of the bullpen. And I've already mentioned him once. It was Jose Bautista.
Yeah, I don't know why I can't remember that. There were so many Bautistas going on for a while. He was the guy that was traded for who? You brought him up last week. Now he was the not opening day starter, but he the game 2 starter in 1990 in that weird ersatz beginning of the season. He was a regular present. He's one of those guys that just somehow I have a blind spot to, I think.
Yeah, he signed with the Cubs in December of 92.
Oh, so who's the other guy? Who's the Bautista from 1990? Never mind. It's not the same guy. That's
Miguel?
What I mean. Miguel. Maybe no, that's the guy.
Yeah.
Yes. And pitched the World Series.
I don't remember who we were talking about. I just remember that. So my friends at Northern, we used to make. I would act like Jose was great because he was 10-3 with a 2.82 ERA, and when he was pitching, I would actually I would voice what Jose was clearly telling the hitters, which is, you can't hit my fastball, because he had the straightest fastball in the world, and the guys are swinging through it, and we're like, why are they not just annihilating him?
I'm going to challenge that. That not only did Jose Bautista not have the straightest fastball in the world, he didn't even have the straightest fastball on the team. That would belong, of course, to the aforementioned Bob Scanlon.
Oh, that's true. Well, Bob, this would have been Bob's last year.
He and Chuck both were given trials as closers in 92, and they both eventually kept blowing games after a couple.
This was year. Wait a minute.
This is their third year in the organization.
Okay, this is year 1 of Jim Lefebvre.
Year 2.
This is year 2. He gets canned with a winning. Oh, that's right. I remember my buddy Keith was.
He finished with a 500 record because
he finally had a winning season. They fired the manager, so they hired Jim Riggleman. That's right.
No, Tom Troublehorn in between.
Oh, we had Troublehorn. All right, the thing I was setting up was Riggleman. That was always another joke, was that he always had Bob Scanlon warming up in the bullpen. Like, Bob would warm up for 6 innings every game and come in just exhausted.
Right.
Somewhere, Jim Riggleman is every time he picks up the phone, no matter what, he's just gets Gallen up. Like, no, he hasn't pitched for you for 30 years. What?
That tracks. I think that tracks.
God, that's right. I get, there's the mediocre Cub managers. We've had so many.
Yeah.
It takes me a minute to place them all.
Well, and in the '90s, they did their best to make it simple by just having the milk toast white guys named Jim. Interrupted by Tom. But yeah.
Yeah. So we literally went. So we went Jim Essien, Jim Lefebvre,
Yes.
Trebelhorn, Jim Riggleman.
And Jim Riggleman. Right. That's it. Yeah, they finally mixed it up with Don Baylor. They started actually acting like big boys with managerial hires, even though if they weren't being big boys with free agent signees. But in the '90s, both the managerial hires and the free agent signings were similarly uninspiring.
Yeah, we talked about the Cubs. The Cub job was the job where the manager's career went to die.
Yes, until
Riggleman, right? When
Riggleman, but not for like 15 years.
Yeah, and
either.
he was interim when he first got to manage again, and then he finally got a job on his own.
Well, Riggs got like 3 more cracks at the apple, but there was like a 10-year gap for him after the Cubs. Baylor never worked again, but Dusty, I think, actually got a job before Riggleman's second. I think Dusty was the first former Cub manager in our lifetime to work again.
Yeah, when he went to the Reds.
Yeah, just
and he talked
2
about
or 3
it.
years
Dusty
later.
literally talked about how he had to go get a job immediately because A, he thought it was hard for black managers if they sat out a year to get another job, and B, he's like, I just managed an organization where once they fire you, you never work again. And he wasn't wrong.
No, it's been different since. I mean, Joe Madden's gone elsewhere. Ricky Renteria's gone on a cornucopia of recycled managers, but for a while, you're right, it was a graveyard.
Dale Fame still hasn't. Someday, he's getting another job. Cubs were his second job, though.
Perhaps.
Because remember, we talked about in 2008, we talked about how they canned Ned Yost with like a week to go in the season.
Dale took him to the playoffs. He did, right? They made the playoffs that year.
Yeah, they lost to the Phillies. And he was their manager.
They lost to the Phillies, but not in the LCS. Their only LCS the last 40 years was in 2013 or something. Are they one of those Cardinals years?
Yeah,
so
whatever year that was. And they blew.
One of the few teams that have a
Prince Fielder, Ryan Braun Brewers, and they.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Did they play in the? They didn't play in the LCS against the Dodgers.
Oh, more recently, you're right. But
that was when Craig Counsell did the Wade Miley shenanigans, where he started him for one batter. Yeah. And it's ironic because Wade has made a couple of those starts for the Cubs. One batter, my arm hurts. Oh, okay. Well, you can come out now. So, it's not a playoff game, Wade. What? You can pitch to the second batter. No, I can't. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I found the Randy Myers game because he only blew 3 saves. And his save on July 3rd, 1993 would have been his only one on a Saturday.
Oh.
Yeah, because I know that's when they were there. So I don't know if that's true or not. Good
hustle by the Cubs having Randy Meyer poster day during his first year.
Yeah.
Much like Nick Madrigal bobblehead day that they had a couple days ago.
Yes. Did you see that? I saw that. Right? Was that a Cubs thing? I misread it at first because it was at the bar. The whatever you call it, the Budweiser Brick House, which is part of that new complex that butts up to Gallagher Way. So the dude was sitting inside that bar, not in the stadium. He looked like a Cubs employee. He had the polo shirt, and they were stacked up there. And then he told me it was for a private party. When I left, I just thought my wife thought they were giving him away. Right. But was the giveaway also going on in the ballpark that day? Or?
Yes.
Jesus Christ!
People were lined up.
Holy mother of Christ!
To get
for the lifelike
bobblehead,
right, for the life size.
Yeah, it's not actual size. It's actually bigger than Nick.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah, the thing I remember about Randy Myers' poster day was after everybody threw all the stuff. When he got interviewed after the game, he said, "I would have booed me too." So
I don't. Yeah, we've kind of rehashed the Randy Myers and. I think by and large, he pretty much checks out as a net positive. Pretty cool guy and just had some interesting moments and, kind of keep you on your toes a little bit.
He was good.
So,
mean,
He only blew 3 games, 53 out of 56 saves. That's part of the reason he dragged their dead ass over 500.
Let's look at the Randy Myers career with the Cubs here.
There is an archived Seattle. Oh, wait a second. Maybe I was wrong. August 15th? Could have been later in the year. Because I did find an article that was from the Seattle Times. It says, what began as your typical baseball promotion turned into the Randy Myers poster a disaster. But that's dated August 15th. So I need to do a little bit more internet research before I just start throwing out July 5th. For some reason, I thought he had only blown 3 saves that whole season. And turns out
he could have blown too many. I can't imagine they had more than 56 leads.
All right.
Well, I guess they did. I guess we know they had 80. How many games they win? 84, 83?
80 that they finished over 500.
So in 3 years with the Cubs, he saved 112 games. He struck out 177 guys, 171 innings. Only allowed 154 hits. That's not that great. Struck out 9.3 guys per inning. The only team that he struck out more for. Well, no, he did it for Baltimore too. Baltimore and the Mets. He struck out 9.9 batters per 9 innings. Yeah, he was good.
Yeah, we discovered too he happened to show up on the '98 Cubs down the stretch. Yeah, so it's weird that Baseball Reference does not credit the game on August 15th as a blown save. But that is Randy Myers because there's an article that corroborates it. But I found the game, and he blew a 2-0 lead in the top of the 9th. He blew 2 games against the Giants.
There you go. Well, he was trying
to because he blew one in late May also. Todd Benzinger had the big hit there.
Wow. How are you going to get Todd Benzinger out?
With 2 outs, but then Mark Grace ended up winning it at the end. A couple other random thoughts I had. I just want to get out there, so I don't want to fail to mention it. Jose Vizcaino filled the void because Sandberg couldn't play. They basically had to move around, and he got off to a hot start. He was really good, and they ended up trading for Anthony Young. And then the other thing, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, that sometime in May, and I'll find the game because I was driving back from DeKalb down North Avenue listening. True story. I know I was listening to Wayne Larrivee call the action for some weird reason on a Sunday afternoon after school had ended at Northern, early May 1993, when Mark Grace hit what is still the last cycle for a Cubs.
Oh, yes.
So that did happen in 1993. And I know it happened at home, and I can just tell you that it also happened on Sunday, May 2nd, I believe, against the Reds. Although it seems early for me to be coming home from school. Oh, no. I was Sunday, May 9th against the Padres. That's it, folks.
Jose Vizcaino in the first half that year, 309, 351, 381.
Yeah, validated.
Not a lot of thump, but he was hitting over 300 at the All-Star. He should have been an All-Star. I don't know why he was an All-Star.
Yeah. He
getting any hits.
He helped mitigate against Sandberg's absence early on, but they were screwed. No Maddux, no Sandberg. Yeah, Vizcaino. I'm pleased that the numbers bear it out. He just seemed to get off to a really good start. And Grace himself had probably his finest season. The closest he came, I remember, to 100 RBIs. I think he had 98. Probably one of his 2 finest seasons, actually. It's probably peak Mark Grace, 1993. He'd gotten his life back on track. He had gotten over his divorce with Michelle. He just gotten himself more into like the game readiness and hanging out and living the life in the toast of Wrigleyville and being the line drive hitting first baseman that 956 OPS. No, that can't be right. That was at a point in the season. That is definitely not Mark Grace. But it was his probably best all-around offensive season, I think.
So, Jose Vizcaino, you'd be shocked to know that being traded for Otis Smith and Anthony Young was not the biggest trade he was ever in. In 1996, he and Jeff Kent were traded from the Mets to the Indians for Carlos Baerga and Alvaro Espinoza.
Oh.
And then, if you trade Jeff Kent, you have to trade Jose Vizcaino, because then in 1996, He was traded by the Indians with Jeff Kent, another illustrious Cub, Julian Tavares, to the Giants for a player named later and Matt Williams. And then the Indians later sent Joe Roa to the Giants to complete the trade. The Giants sent Trent Hubbard to the Indians to complete the trade.
Would that be Trinidad Hubbard?
Yes.
Former Cub? Future Cub?
Yep.
It looked like the cigar store Indian.
Yep, good old Trinidad Trent Hubbard. He played for the 2003 Cubs.
Yes, he did very briefly, but not on the playoff roster. Amongst that was a very impressive name salad that you dropped out there. You mentioned Joe Roa. Pat Hughes once surmised if during a game in 1996, I believe, for the Giants, maybe later, whether or not Joe Roa had the shortest first and last name in baseball history. Just 6 letters.
Well, Ron Santo.
Oh, look at you. Wow, you just turned that one around. Fuck you, Joe Roa.
Yep, you're tied.
So, yeah. So, Jose Vizcaíno then was in some rarefied air playing for some good teams. I mean, these are good Indians teams and Giants teams.
Useful. He was a useful.
He really was.
Player.
Yeah.
Switch hitter, could play second and short and third.
Yeah, Cubs had a bit of a parade of those guys. It just seemed like Ray Sanchez, Jose Vizcaíno, who they traded and then basically replaced with Jose Hernandez. They just kind of had to keep this sort of thing in flux.
Do we know if 93 was the immortal Harry, the pop-up to Ray Sanchez? He goes, he'll never dropped one of these in his life, and then he dropped it. Harry was very amused by the fact that happened.
Couldn't name it. I'll tell you, I had a Harry Carey moment, though, because 93 was the year that I turned 21. I'm sure you were right behind me.
Harry and Pete Von Aken buy you some drinks. You ran into him at a bar one night.
No, managed to pull off the unlikeliest of doubleheaders when my buddy, a couple of us, I think one of my buddy's girlfriends, were in the bleachers. There's a game against the Rockies, and I want to say Pedro Astacio was pitching for Colorado. And I remember like third or fourth inning, kind of taking a stretch in between innings, looking over our shoulder and saying, looking at the scoreboard and saying, the White Sox are playing tonight in Milwaukee. So SoCo is that we ended up seeing the other end of the doubleheader in Milwaukee. Not sure how we made it back, but I'm here to tell the story. So there you have it.
Beautiful county stadium.
I did. We did that in 96 too. So, you only live once.
So Glenn Allen Hill was on the 93 Cubs.
Because he was acquired for the aforementioned Candy Maldonado. Larry Himes, to his credit, cutting his losses on the free agent signing that was Candy, bringing in Glenn Allen for the first of 2, or maybe even 3.
3. No,
2. 3 separate, definitely 2 discrete tenures with the Cubs. This is the first one, though.
Yeah, 2. I would guess in 2000 he played for the Cubs and the Yankees. I would guess that he started with the Cubs and went to the Yankees. His 1993, the Glenn Allen Hill. This is what Glenn Allen did for the Cubs. In 87 at-bats, he hit 10 homers, drove in 22 runs, hit 345, 387 on base, and a 770 slugging for a 1.157 OPS. He basically should have been MVP.
I kind of remember that. And I remember I was like, hey, I would have settled for half of that just to get rid of Maldonado.
He followed it up in 94. They played a short schedule, but he only played in 89 games. And if he got hurt, or they're like, well, Glenn Allen, he can't catch a fly ball, so it's tough. 297, 365, 461.
Yeah.
He was pretty good in that whole stint with the Cubs.
Yeah, I would say so. Glenn Allen himself was considered a bit of a washout, like a young, hot prospect. I think he came up with the Blue Jays in the late 80s, early 90s. So he was already sort of settling into.
That's how he got his nickname.
What was the nickname?
Spider-Man. Do you remember the story? So he was a rookie with the Blue Jays. He was living in the Sky Dome Hotel. He had a nightmare that there were spiders that were on him. He jumped out of bed and crashed through a glass coffee table in the hotel room and cut himself.
That's right. I do remember that now.
At least that's what he said.
Is not quite as preposterous as Brian Robinson breaking his thumbs on his dogs in the driveway.
Brian Greasy didn't say. Didn't Brian Greasy also tripped over his dogs too? The Cub Bears had an epidemic there for a while. Who was the guy who claimed he slipped on a McDonald's wrapper? Do you remember that?
I got nothing on that one. Sorry.
Dave and I were talking on last night's podcast about phony baloney baseball injuries, and the boys at Lou fell off the treadmill. Everybody knew he was playing basketball, and he blew out his knee.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. Actually, what got us started was Chris Sale falling off the bike, and then the whole Steve Trout falling off the exercise bike.
Stationary bike, yeah.
It was not stationary when Rainbow Trout was on it. It was. But how about this? So this Glenn Allen, how about this quirk? So he, in '93 shows up midway through the season or late in the season for the Cubs, hits .345. In '98, when they acquired him from the Mariners, where he had been not terrible, but he played 48 games for the '98 Cubs. He hit .351 with a .414 on base and a .573 slugging. So the key with Glenn Allen was simply let him start the season with somebody else, and then go get him, and he'll just tear it up.
And
although in '99 with the Cubs, 300, 353, .581. That was ball on the roof year, right?
No, it's 2000. He was on the Cubs as late as 2000.
His third stint. When he hit the... Oh, no, that's right. That was the end of his second stint.
He got dealt at the end of that year to the Yankees, I think.
Yep. All roided up for that one.
And we give it some great detail because I remember it very poignantly. It was a great late summer or midsummer game where he hit a lead-changing bottom of the eighth, what would be game-winning two-run homer off of John Franco in a Saturday game against the Mets in '98. And he was their outfielder in left. He was kind of like the Gary Matthews-esque, you kind of hold your breath, but he made some running catches in the 1-0 / 2-1 Kevin Tapani, Javier Lopez game. So, yeah, I get nothing but fond memories for Glenn Allen. Again,
there were times in '98 and '99 where the Cubs were playing the outfield of Henry Rodriguez, Sammy Sosa, and Glenn Allen Hill.
Well, I mean, Brant Brown, like when Lance Johnson couldn't play center, Brant Brown was out there. Oh, my God.
It's called the linebacker
outfield. It's not much better in '93, though, right? You're starting with Dwight Smith in center. Dawson's gone for the first time. He's replaced by Sosa, of course.
Yeah, you got Candy Maldonado covering all that ground.
And then Maldonado on left would be Glenn Allen. So, yeah, outfield, a bit of a mess. Sosa, of course, played a bit of center field still, I think, early in '93. He was settling into right where he'd be decent for a few years. Mostly his arm would make up for his other deficiencies. So,
oh, yeah, I want to look up. Maybe you said it. I was busy looking something up when we were talking about this. So, when Sammy got his 30-30, that happened in that series in San Francisco, right? Is that what you?
I don't know. No, I can't. I just remember on the radio hearing Santo lose his shit.
I think it did because I remember writing a story in a journalism class about it. I had to turn in
wow,
and I'm pretty sure that it happened in San Francisco. So
okay,
let's see here. Did he?
All you gotta do is find. I don't think it'll be too hard to find a caught stealing. I think it was on the weekend though. If that helps, was that a weekend series?
Maybe I'm dreaming, or maybe it happened the second time he did it. Because I'm looking here. They went back. Oh, that's August. 95. That's too early. Oh, yeah. Oh, at San Francisco. Here we go. Stolen base.
Yeah.
There it is. September 13th.
That sounds absolutely. Was it weekend? Sounds absolutely correct. I don't even remember hearing it. I think I remember Oleg, who's one of my roommates, was like, "Did you hear the Cubs game? Oh my God, Ron Santo was going nuts. Sam was trying to steal the base."
There's stolen base number 29. This is on.
Well, he might have actually stolen it. In my telling of it, I'm saying Santo criticized him for getting caught. He may have been safe, and he still got criticized, right?
Sammy just steal a base? Nope.
But
for some reason, and I don't know why I would even remember that. I seem to remember that it was like Dateline San Francisco. There it is.
Okay.
It was Wednesday, September 15th. Sammy stole his 30th base. How about this? Off of Solomon Torres and Jeff Reed. And let's see, how many home runs? Well, I'm sure he already had the 30 homers. He was trying to get the stolen bases. So there it was.
Yes. Well, that will bring it full circle because Solomon Torres would get. So Sammy Sosa gets his 30th stolen base to become a member of history with the Cubs, being the first 30-30 man. And then 11 years later would get his helmet shattered in iconic fashion by the same Solomon Torres.
Solomon, who spells it Salo.
Right, Salomon, right.
Salmon, like he's a fish. Or Salman Rushdie. Is he hiding out from?
In 1993, he still was. I think Satanic Verses came out around 88 or 89. So, yeah, Solomon definitely in hiding. We haven't gone into Rick Wilkins' weird-ass 93.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe one of the most powerful offensive season by a Cubs catcher, right? Maybe even more so than Willie Con, because Willie doesn't hit like 30 homers and shit, right?
Yeah,
That's
is Rick Wilkins the only Cub catcher to hit 30 home runs?
Jody never did. Jody was a great catcher, but I know he never hit 30. Michael Barrett was a defensive zero.
Did Todd Hundley ever do it?
Not with the Cubs, not a chance.
That's right. Did he hit 30 in 3 years with the Cubs?
No, he only played 2 years, thankfully. I don't think he had half of that. I don't think he had 15. So yeah, it was weird. He had 30 home. I lost the 93 season, but I thought he had like 60 RBIs or something ridiculous. What was it like?
Todd Hundley hit 28 homers for the Cubs total in 2 years.
I was being mean. Yeah, he did have well more than half of 30.
He basically he combined for Rick Wilkins' season 28 homers and 66 RBIs, but it took him 2 years to do it.
Well, how many RBIs did Wilkins have?
70.
73.
30 homers and 70 RBIs.
That's right. All right.
And you figure he drove himself in 30 times.
Yeah.
So he's like, hey, thanks a lot, guys, for never getting on base in front of me.
937 OPS, 446, 500 plate appearances. I mean, that's a hell of a season. I mean, he may have had the highest OPS for catchers in the National League. Definitely qualifies with 500 plate appearances. That's nuts.
It would lead to a big trade.
Not for 2 years.
Right.
You mean when?
Don't you think the Astros were still like, remember that guy? He had 30 home runs that one.
Well, just remember when I pointed out that Ed Lynch absolutely fleeced Bob Watson into giving, because Wilkins went right on the DL right after playing, and then we actually got a little bit of value out of Scott Service and Luis Gonzalez. But yeah, that was Rick Wilkins' one good season. Like Castillo, he came up. He may have come up late in 91. Now I think about it, but I always
how about this? Let's dive. Why not? Let's dive into Rick Wilkins' 1993 season.
I'm here for it.
How about this? He hit 20 of his 30 homers on the road. He hit 356 away from Wrigley Field. He had 256 at home. 20 homers and 42 RBIs. He had 73 RBIs. 20 homers, 42 RBIs on the road. 10 homers and 31 at home. His on-base average was 440 on the road. It was 317 at Wrigley.
What the hell?
His slugging was 712 away from Wrigley. It was 429 at the friendly confines. His OPS 1.151 on the road and 745 at home.
Jesus Christ.
He had a terrible April. He hit 122, but then he hit 229, 414, 256, 250, 286, and 352 in September. He was trying to carry the Cubs to the pennant. Hey Rick, we're 10 games back.
Crazy.
He was 4 for 9 as a pinch hitter with 2 homers. So even when he didn't start, he was a threat.
And did you see who his backup was too? I think it's his primary backup. But it was the return of Steve Lake.
Oh yeah, of course.
Who I had not recall was on briefly the 83 Cubs, but thought of more as Jody's backup in 84 before despairing. Came back 9 years later. Who can't use a backup catcher 9 years after you first had him?
So when you see a guy with 30 homers and 72 RBIs, 73 RBIs, you think, all right, so was he just hitting meaningless home runs? And when guys were on base, he wasn't doing anything? With men on base in 1993, Rick Wilkins hit 322 with a 425 on base and a 528 slug.
I don't get it.
Runners in scoring position, he hit 283 with a 427 on base, 487 slugging. So he had a 913 OPS with runners in scoring position, a 953 OPS with men on. So the entire indictment is not on Rick; it's on his teammates not getting their ass on base in front of him,
or scoring from second on hits. Like I think they all pulling Cal Daniels's, which I know happened the year
Dwight
before.
Smith got thrown out 18 times at home plate.
Right. I guarantee you, Dwight Smith got thrown out, and at least two.
Was accidentally turning right at third base and ending up in the crowd. He's like, "Wait, am I safe?" No. You just jumped over the tarp. Poor Rick. Oh, I was going to look at where he batted because maybe we can blame this on Lefebvre. Like, was he batting eighth? Um, he batted cleanup 5 times. Well, he had Sammy Sosa, so you don't need to do that.
Right.
He batted fifth 48 times. Predominantly, he batted sixth, and he liked it. 202 at bats, hitting sixth, 366, 423, 673, batting sixth.
Okay.
And then he had a bunch of at bats. He batted eighth, 102 times. So he hit 10 of his homers, batting eighth. Oh, here is very illustrative. So he hits 30 homers. He hit 10 of them batting eighth. On those 10 home runs, how many RBIs did he hit?
How many? I'm sorry, I missed it. How many?
He hit 10 homers, batting eighth.
Is it? It's either 10 or 11.
15.
Mm.
He hit 10 home runs and only drove in other guys 5 times.
Wow.
Why is he batting eighth?
Jim Lefebvre.
Yeah. No wonder we fired him.
Lefebvre at the time was one of the more popular celebrities besides Fran Tarkenton, who would do plugs for Tony Robbins' infomercials.
Oh, good.
FYI. Yeah. He had Tony Robbins speak to the Cubs in spring training '93.
So is he Joe Lefebvre's brother?
Joe Lefebvre. We went over this.
Oh, we did. I remember anything.
No relation.
No relation. I would hope if they're pronouncing their name different.
Yes.
It would be funny
no
if
relation.
they were brothers. And they just that's not our name. It's Lefebvre.
Jim Lefebvre
it's Lefebvre.
Jim Lefebvre is a ball player, was best known as part of an all switch hitting infield with the Dodgers in the 60s. Also on the Dodgers team in 66 that had probably easily the most woeful World Series offensive performance against Jim Palmer and the Baltimore Orioles. But I do think Lefebvre may have homered early in that series before the Dodgers lost on 4 straight shutouts.
Yeah, he was Rookie of the Year in 1965.
Yeah.
Finished
and I think it was
21st MVP voting. He was an All-Star in 66. And then that was it. He
may have also been on an episode of Bewitched or The Munsters, or I don't think it was Brady Bunch, but yeah, those Los Angeles ball players. Yeah, and Lefebvre had been, I think. All right, so this just popped into my head. The Seattle Mariners were a perennially woeful franchise. Both them and the Blue Jays came into the league in '77. Both sucked for 7-8 years. Blue Jays got good in the mid '80s. Seattle continued to suck until Griffey, and then when they're about to move around this time, Lefebvre, I want to say, was the first manager in Seattle history to lead them to a 500 or better season.
That is correct, and he got fired.
And he got fired after that. That's probably
83 and 79 in 1991. First time they'd ever been over 500. And he had a pretty, considering who he was managing, 73 and 89 his first year, 77 and 85, and then 83 and 79. Comes the Cubs in 92, so that very next year.
Yeah.
78 and 84, then 84 and 78 and gets canned.
Yeah, it never got a job again.
He was an interim for the Brewers in 99, and he was 22 and 27 to finish out the season.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know if you rub people the wrong way. I don't know. It seems odd. You got a little Rick Renteria vibe there going on, I guess. But I didn't really have any real problem, like in particular with it. I thought it was dumb, and we've talked about it, how the Cubs did supposedly rally to save his job by having that hot ass September and finishing over 500. And Larry Himes fired him anyway, which, like I said, was just stupid because it was his first hire. And he didn't really have a plan in mind anyway. All he did was
clear when you hired Tom Troublehorn.
Right, yeah, you come up from third base. So I don't know. Maybe he just rubbed people the wrong way, or
I mean, you can also give him the benefit of the doubt. Larry Himes was a world-renowned prick.
100%.
So it could have been that Jim was literally just standing up for himself, and Larry didn't like that, and fired.
Okay, yeah, could be. I mean, I wasn't going to go take to the streets for Jim Lefebvre, but I did.
I rioted. I threw the couch through the window of our apartment and set it on fire. And everybody said, you were Cubs fire Jim Lefebvre.
Yeah, I was looting the paperback grotto in downtown DeKalb.
No, you're just shoplifting. That's different. That's not looting. When you're the only one doing it, it's shoplifting. It's not looting.
So I've got one that will that will please you. If you look up Shawon Dunston's line, he was a '93 Cub,
Yeah, he had
your
400 that
guy.
year. That
But
was the year
right,
he hit 400.
but if you look at his season by season, he played what in 18 games in '92, and then 7 in '93. And so he started the season. He was on the opening day lineup in '92. Okay. And then, he pulled, you're the one that filled in the gap and said, he got pulled a baby seat, tore out his back. He was gone
ruptured a disc taking a car seat out of the car. I would guess for Sean Jr.
So he misses the last like 85% of the 92 season and then the first like 90%. And this is just kind of I was not as big of a Dunston fan as you were, but he always, he could stir men's hearts, so to speak, because of his unbridled enthusiasm. Now he's getting old now he's been around 8 years. He's been a major injury. He's been gone forever. This listless team has gone through 2 seasons mostly. He comes back in September and there's a game. This is going to be anecdotal, but I can tell you what game it was because I know it was on a weekend. And it was really his second game back, September 4th, 1993. And just what I remember about it in the game itself, the Mets were of no consequence. But this is the post-Gooden era. I mean, he's still on the team, but they're not what they were in the late 80s. Greag Maddux's brother is on the hill in the bottom of the 8th, but the Cubs are chasing a run. And it's only Dunston's second game. And Sandberg leads off with a walk, and Dunston ties it with a double. And I say this as anecdotal because I just remember being in my living room on College Avenue, just kind of happened to walk by, the TV was on, the game was on, and Harry, as you could imagine, because he was an incredibly unbridled, enthusiastic broadcaster, was out of his shoes because Dunston was that type of a player. I don't know if you could find a clip of it, but I just remember like getting goosebumps because Dunston, here he is, a poor guy. He's been out of baseball for almost 2 years. Ties the game up, driving home his double play combo, Sandberg to tie it, and then Sosa drove in the go ahead run, and Dunston says there single to center. Dunston scores, but Dunston like hustled his ass off, head first slide to home. Harry's going nuts. It's a meaningless game, although the Cubs are charging to be an over 500 team. It's just a moment, it's just a snapshot, and obviously didn't mean anything, but. It's one that I just clearly remember that I wanted to put on the record for the '93 season because, like I said, I was not as huge of a Dunston. I mean, nobody could be as big of a Dunston fan as you. I thought he had a lot of faults, but I would be the first to admit how exciting he was, and that was a fucking moment that I actually won't forget, as mundane as it otherwise was.
So it's funny if you go to YouTube and you search Shawon Dunston Cubs versus Mets, you get like apparently in a bat against Dwight Gooden, but then you get a lot of unrelated stuff like him coming out to the mound to try to beat up Sergio Valdez of the Giants, and then the very next clip is him punching Expos pitcher Andy McGaffigan.
Andy McGaffigan?
Yeah. That
was on Easter Sunday, 1980. That was actually 2 days after the Bill Murray game in 1987.
YouTube really likes. Here's a nice clip of Sean being hit by a batted ball as a base runner 2 games in a row. That's nice.
Wow. What are the odds? Well, but nothing about his dash for home.
The odds were the Sean was on base in 2 games in a row, more than that he got hit by the ball.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find that, but I don't.
Too bad. It's a really insignificant game, and even in the context of the season. So, but it was take my word for it. It's just one of those moments that if you saw it, you probably wouldn't forget it, in spite of how mundane it was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a tough break for Sean to get hurt. He was only 29 when he got hurt, but he stuck around. He played till he was, he played till he was 39. But he was a utility. Yeah. Basically, once he hurt his back, he
shifted. He was never the
utility player after that. 95, he played most of the year at short for the Cubs.
Yeah, at the risk of being like sentimental, I think that's what that moment was like a poignant sort of a glimpse of like he was never. He never was that type of a player after '93.
Yeah. Starting in '98, he went to Cleveland, and they became a utility player.
Yeah, because he did continue to play shortstop for the Cubs, but
he played nothing but shortstop for the Cubs until '97. He played at least a little bit in left
field.
Yeah.
Oh, my dad would have been happy clamoring for him to play center 10 years earlier.
And then in '98, he goes to the Indians, and all of a sudden he's playing second and short and left and center.
Yeah.
And 1 year for the for the Giants. Oh, the Cardinals. Fucking La Russa.
Oh, that's right.
He played center, left, right, first, short, and third. Played every position except for catcher and second. Did he ever pitch?
No. I can assure you, Doug DeCenzo was the only dude taking the hill back then. The other
nice too. Nowadays, they would have sent him out there just to see what he could. Because position players pitch like 4 times a week for most teams.
Yeah, right. Nowadays, the other funny thing about that Dunston game late in the '93 season is it pulled the Cubs to 66 and 70. 3 weeks to go. And I was saying, well, the Mets, the bloom was off the rose on those Davey Johnson Mets. You think that loss put them to 47 and 89? So.
Yeah.
They still had Gooden, though, because Gooden would start the next season's opening day at Wrigley Field.
Yeah.
Face Tuffy Rhodes, but yeah, the Mets, that ship had sailed. I know the divisional format was being broken up anyway. The Phillies were the last champion. Yeah. I mean, everything was kind of changing after that season as far as that divisional format.
So the '93 Cubs, obviously they had a Sandberg had to play 117 games, but he wasn't around for opening day. Steve Buechele was a new third baseman.
Opening day. They acquired him for Danny Jackson midway through the previous season. He was actually, Buechele, of course, between Bill Madlock and Naramas Ramirez, was definitely top 3 in most played games. He was what would pass for a regular third baseman.
Oh, yeah.
Opening day.
Right. It was
93,
July
94,
92. So
right.
He'd been there for half a year.
He played long enough to almost confuse Bulls fans with Judd Buechler. That'd be like 95. Steve Buechele, Judd Buechler. But yeah, that's what passed for a regular third baseman back then. Yeah. Basically 3.5 mediocre years.
The Pirates got him in a huge trade with the Rangers. It was him and Kurt Miller and a player named later for Hector Fajardo.
Hector Fardo?
Hector Fajardo. They traded 3 guys for Hector Fajardo? Who the fuck was Hector Fajardo?
I've never heard of it. Never heard of him. I just remember thinking the '91 Cubs still had a shot, and that they should have been going for Steve Buechele that year. Yeah. They didn't, because Gary Scott had flamed out. And we finally got him, and then we're like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, Derek May hit 10 homers and drove in 77 runs.
Probably his finest season as a Cub.
I think it is. He
pretty much an everyday player. We mentioned Derek May because he made his debut in 1990, which we covered last week. And, largely a guy that had a great baseball body, and he just never hit for power. And, it's just a corner outfielder. And, probably had 1,000 at-bats in his career, but not really that.
2,200 at-bats in his career.
Yeah, wow, more than double.
And hit 52 homers.
I think
6'4".
6'4". Yeah, he was tall.
6'4", 210, 52 homers and 2,200 at bats. Hit the ball in the air once in a while, Derek. It'll be fine. Not going to hurt you.
He did once against Denny Martinez or Pedro Martinez, one of those guys, or Ramon Martinez in '92. Ty won a game late, but just too few and far between. We started unpacking this. We go across the board. We kind of did chronological order because the whole Greag Maddux game. I don't know if we really dove into that, but we didn't really give the Jose Guzman game. I mean, let's be honest. It was the first 8 2/3 of no-hit ball since Chuck Rainey 11 years earlier. And we certainly gave Chuck Rainey his due.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you want to go down. Just it was funny that just to maybe tie a bow on the whole Greag Maddux snafu, and now he comes back to pitch the opener, and he was emotional. It was weird. He was getting booed, and in retrospect, it wasn't his fault. So he must be going out of his fucking mind.
Yeah.
But he pitched his ass off. But also Mike Morgan battled him toe to toe. But Maddux prevailed. I don't remember how that game ended or what, but the Braves won. And it was like, oh, God, we wanted to beat Maddux so bad. I hate him so much. He left us. And then out of the fucking blue, Jose Guzman, which again, when the Cubs got him, I remember it was like, oh, we got that Juan Guzman
Yeah.
of the Blue Jays, that
Nope.
badass looking guy.
You got the other guy.
We got the like milk toast, olive skin Jose, not the badass dark skin Jerry curled, flame throwing World Series pitcher. No, it's this other guy that we don't really know. However, in his Cubs debut, Jose Guzman did become the first pitcher to come within one out of a no-hitter since the aforementioned Chuck Rainey. And it was Otis Nixon, right?
Yeah.
Broke this one up. It is Eddie Milner in the other game, Otis Nixon in this one.
I mean, he had a tough ninth inning. He had to face Mark Lemke, Francisco Cabrera, and Otis Nixon.
The Francisco Cabrera, who just months earlier was the first ever player to walk off a series in a deciding game with a lead changing walk off hit. Yes, that one. And then, but he got the win, and then
he got Cub killer Jeff Blauser out to end the game.
So
he balked. He was so rattled after giving up the hit to Otis Nixon, he balked on the first pitch to Blauser.
Was it a 1-0 game? Yeah, that's the other thing I remember. So Maddux goes a 1-0.
Right, the day before had been 1-0, and the Braves scored in the first inning.
Off of Morgan.
The rest of the way. Maddux wasn't a complete game though.
No, Mike Stanton came in
because who got on?
Maybe a pinch hitter although Maddux could probably hit for himself, and of course Morgan didn't go the distance either. But Guzman did, and then I remember it was like you kind of like allow yourself to trick yourself into the Larry Himes thinking, kind of like, well, maybe they're right. I mean, Greag Maddux won the first game, but our guy that we kind of replaced him with, he only gave up one hit. So, and it was all downhill from there for Jose.
In the Maddux game, the guy that drove him from the game, because he was in the ninth, he had to face Candy Maldonado, Sammy Sosa, and Steve Buechele.
Was it Buechele?
Sammy singled and stole second. The first of his 33 stolen bases.
How about that?
Up yours, Ron Santo. What do you mean he never steals in a big spot? In a 1-0 game, he steals second base in the ninth inning.
Especially against Maddux. Absolutely.
And then he walked. He was so rattled by that, he walked Buechele, and that's why they had to bring Mike Stanton in. And Stanton had a tough. He had to face Tommy Shields and Jose Vizcaíno. Who is Tommy Shields? Why don't I remember him?
I don't either. I got nothing on Tommy Shields.
Was it Tommy? Was it Delino to Shields' brother, Tommy? And he just
go with
the duh. I'm dropping the duh. Tommy Shields. Oh, look at this guy. Jesus. Played two. He played 2 games for the Orioles when they didn't give him a bat. They Moonlight Grammed him.
Wow.
And then he played 20 games for the Cubs in '93. He was 6 for 34 with an RBI.
Wow. I remember watching because we were on spring. Harrison was where we were living in the spring, and the rubber match went extra innings. So, you get off to the season and then the Braves are at the peak of their game. But I just looked it up right now. In the rubber match, the Cubs tied it in the ninth. And I can't even imagine this happening. But Matt Walbeck, the backup catcher, tied it off a future Cub, Kent Merker, in the ninth before I remember David Justice, I think, hit a homer. No, I guess it was Ron Gant.
I'd like to see.
However,
they single to Merker. What is that even? Ground ball to the pitcher's right. So I bet it's one of those where you hit the ball like 30 feet and it's like in the perfect spot.
Infield hit. The fans are going nuts. And Kent Merker, of course, will get his just desserts when the wheel falls on 2004. But we'll just suffice that he blew a save in that game. But then the Braves won it. So you're like, the Cubs played them tough, but it was all an illusion. They didn't have Maddux. They didn't have Sandberg. Things were just shitty. And the 93 season, definitely not shitty, but completely designed to just be mediocre. That's it.
I was trying to think of, so that Ron Gant, this was not, remember the year that they demoted him all the way to Class A?
I do. Vaguely. Why did they do that? Didn't he wipe out on a motorcycle after he signed a contract and set his career back or something?
He came up as a second baseman.
He did.
And in his first full season, which was 88, he hit 19 homers and 60 RBIs. He hit 259. He was fourth in voting for Rookie of the Year.
Oh, that was the Chris Sable, Mark Grace rookie.
89 is the year they sent him down. He was hitting 177 at the time. But they sent him all the way to Class A and made him learn how to play the outfield.
Okay.
That
worked.
He came back as an outfielder.
You got to hand it to John Sherholz. The 88 Braves was probably pretty miserable. The Braves were absolutely miserable in the mid to late 80s. And then beginning in 91, when Glavine shows up, Smoltz is there. Like you said, Gant, they invested, Justice was the Rookie of the Year ahead of Mike Harkey in 1990. It all kind of came together, but that's a pretty good move because Gant was a pretty, productive player, right?
Yeah. He was.
And they also, the Braves were a gorilla by this time. I mean, they were not even at their peak. Peak would be like 95, 96. Year in and year out. That's who the Cubs wish they could be.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. The Cubs were they were 11-11 in April, 13-12 in May, 13-15 in June, 15-12 in July. So they were the epitome of mediocre. They slumped in August. They were 12-18, but then in September and October they were 20-10.
Got to save Jim Lefebvre's job.
Jim Lefebvre. They were rallying for good old Jimmy. Probably would have saved his job, except they got swept in a doubleheader on the 26th of September against the Pirates.
Ooh.
They were 80-74 going into the doubleheader.
They really rocketed.
They were in fourth place, only 14.5 games out first.
Yeah. So, like I said, it was interesting. It says more about the lack of consistency for the organization that for you and I, they had only, until 1993, had only been 500 twice. So let's just say you and I know I'm a little bit older than you. Let's just, like what we're doing here, we begin with 1980. In this timeline that we've arbitrarily sort of established, this is only chronologically the third out of 13 above 500 seasons. But it's the first one in which the other two, they decided just to go all the way and win the division. Yeah. So it was like a weird thing. So they would be like, all right, Cubs suck. Oh my God, they win 96 games and almost go to the World Series. Now we suck again. And we're getting better. And then 89, they win 88 games. And then again, they're under 500 for like 4 straight years or 3 straight years after 90. And so 93, it was like a novelty. It was like, well, this team has never been in contention. They were never there was never any discussion. They didn't get any heartbreaking September losses that kicked them in the crotch like in 2001, but they managed to finish 500 for the first. I'm 21 years old. That's the first time that's happened without a division title going along with it. Just an oddity more than anything, but it's a fact nonetheless. And then the same thing would happen in 95, which we already covered.
I was 31 years old before they had back-to-back winning seasons.
2004, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then Lou was the first time that they did 3 years in a row in 2009. And then finally the Theo, what do we have? 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Right? They were over 500 when they missed the playoffs in 19, or no, maybe not.
No, they were 84-78.
Okay, so 6 years in a row. Freaking Valhalla.
In fact, they were on pace. They were going to win 90 games. Remember, they had like a 9-game losing streak late in the year.
Yeah, Kimbrough kept blowing games. We're talking about
the ninth was like the Joe sitting in the dugout in St. Louis and next to Theo, and Joe's not coming back. Both acting like Joe acting like he wasn't super pissed when he was. That's all right. Everything worked out great after that. So it's a good move by the Cubs.
I guess it gives a little bit of perspective, though. At least then they were year in and year out what we were hoping the Braves would be, right? And the Braves only won 1 World Series, right? They hadn't won it yet by 93. They would go on to win their 3rd straight division and then not go back through it. Of course, they had so many more bites of the apple than the Cubs did because the Cubs preemptively cut it short after 5 seasons, the modern Cubs. But that's who we wanted to be, was the Braves, right? Or what the Bears were in the 80s. At least the can you at least be in contention legitimately every year like the Braves were? I mean, that's what you should shoot for as an organization. Nobody can control whether or not you win the World Series. A lot of X factors then. And that's all we wanted. 93 was just that sort of reminder that, every so many years, Cubs will be 500. It might make the playoffs. So at least we did have that in the recently truncated Theo era.
The Braves had that 15-year stretch where they were over 500 every year and made the playoffs 14 out of the 15 years.
Yeah. So
and the only year they didn't was the only reason they didn't was there were no playoffs.
94.
And they weren't in first place, so that when people would give them shit about their division title streak that they always bragged about. They're like, well, if they'd have finished in 94, you weren't going to win it.
Because of the why?
They
Expos were awesome, but the Expos. Oh, you're right, Expos. I forgot that 94.
Yeah, they were 6 games behind the Expos when the strike.
In the newly formed NL East, the Cubs were those. All I forget because that season ended short. That 94, we were in the 3-division intra-league format.
Right.
The Cubs were in the NL. That was the first year of the NL Central. So the Braves and Expos for the first time were in the same division. And they would not have won the division that year. You're right. Well, they could have. I mean, there were 6 weeks. Look what they did to the fucking Giants year before. It's pretty disrespectful to just.
Yeah,
although the Expos were pretty damn good. Yeah, they were.
Well, and there's also the Cardinals have in one of the years on their stupid fence, they have a division championship pennant, and they didn't win the division that year. They tied with the Astros, and the Astros had the tiebreaker. They were the wild card, and they have a division championship because they tied. It's like, well, you didn't win the fucking division. You didn't.
No.
You literally didn't get that playoff spot.
Right. Cheap assholes.
Gave themselves one. It's like, Jesus, they love to brag about how successful they are, but they'll do that with one lousy fucking division championship.
You think they'd be above that and let the record otherwise stand for itself?
I was out for a run one day, and somewhere in this neighborhood, I noticed there's a flag that you could see it's in the house, I think. I found it amused me so much. It's a 2017 Cubs NL Central Championship.
After the World Series, why would you settle for that?
Why did you buy that? And why are you flying it? Did you guys realize they did win a World Series? Maybe you could do that instead. It was the best. And I laughed when I saw it because it reminded me of the days when we would have bought that. Because hey, they won something.
Series.
They won, yeah. But in 2017, you should not be buying that. And there's also I've seen a car that has a 2016 NL Champions license plate.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you ran out between that and the World Series and bought the license plate frame. You couldn't have waited 10 days and then bought the World Series one. I just love it.
I love it. I just thought of one thing that I'm glad I thought of it now as we're probably winding down, and it's kind of a continuation. I know we don't do this in sequence chronologically, but we did cover 1990 last week when Mike Harkey was the Rookie of the Year runner-up to David Justice. And then it was a little frustrating. Harkey, he must have been injured 91, 92, and I remember 93 would be the year that he started to look good again, and pretty well timed, boy. They could use you down the stretch, Mike. And that was the fateful Mike Harkey cartwheel because he never pitched for the Cubs after 1993. And really, I don't know how good he was. He did throw 157 innings. So it was this. So this is the thing. Mike Harkey, when he was Rookie of the Year runner-up, 173 innings in a 3.26 ERA in 1990, 18.2 innings in 1991. Obviously injured. 1992, 189 ERA, but in 38 innings. So he's teasing us. So he only had a 5.26 ERA. He was 10-10 in 93. But I feel like he was pitching well. I don't know, 187 hits and 157 innings. Probably much ado about nothing. But the point of the story is that when they, at least at the time when they thought they could need him, he was fucking around.
Yeah.
And he did a cartwheel and he tore his ACL or something like that. So
then he made a great career move. 94, he signed as a free agent with the Rockies.
Oof. Yeah. You'd think. Oh, my apologies. I'm wrong. Mike Harkey, September 6, 1992.
Oh,
So
that's why he
another
only pitched
Mandela
7
effect.
games.
In
Yeah, because
92,
he made 28 starts in 93.
he actually came back from the cartwheel injury. So sorry, Mike, didn't mean to malign you. And I liked your Mike Harkey story last week about the Beloit game in 03 when some Donnybrook was going on in the locker room. Mike just said, "Hey, just give me the story."
Yeah, you don't want to come in here.
So, all right, my bad. Mike Harkey did not do the cartwheel, and he came back. He courageously came back from his botched cartwheel and went 10-10 before. Yeah, like you said, getting picked up by Colorado. Only he did throw 127 innings in 1995. So that was it. 1997 Dodgers 14 innings.
So when I told that story about Harkey, though, I got the team wrong. He wasn't the pitching coach for the West Michigan Whitecaps. He was the pitching coach for the Battle Creek Yankees. The West Michigan Whitecaps, their manager was former Cub great Phil Regan.
Oh, the Vulture,
yeah.
Who was Mets manager as recently as 2 years. His old balls was a pitching coach for the Mets because he came back to Wrigley. I heard he was like 81 years old.
Yeah. So I remember going into I'll never forget Phil Regan. I go into the clubhouse to give him the box score. And I don't know why, he was sitting, it's an office. I don't know why there's a lawn chair in there, but there's, like the good old fashioned vinyl lawn chairs, with the crisscross.
Vinyl or like a
aluminum,
mesh?
It's aluminum, and then there's like vinyl, and they kind of
cross. The frame is aluminum. I do remember the vinyl. I'm thinking of like the more
a lot of times
meshy.
They're plaid.
Yeah.
So he's sitting on one, naked, and his
balls just hanging
through the lawn chair.
Oh, jeez,
and I'm just like, oh god. So he doesn't get up because he can hurt himself.
Right. Don't get.
And he's like, oh, I said I'll take that. I'm like, okay. So
thanks,
I'm
Phil.
trying not to look at him as a handicapped.
Give me an image that will last you a lifetime.
Like, all right, thanks a lot. Do you have any changes? No. Okay, good. I'm getting out of here. That was the West Michigan Whitecaps.
Love it.
Let's see. They weren't very good. 67 and 73.
Oh, Turk Wendell made his debut in 93. I remember it was a game in which Sammy Sosa, I believe, hit 2 homers. But I remember being excited to read about this sort of Mark Fidrich wannabe that the Cubs had gotten from the Braves, who, of course, would turn out to be one in a long line of Braves reject pitchers that they would foist upon the Cubs. And but he got called up, and I want to see this guy jump over the foul line when the inning's over. And then
I think the key part of that Turk Wendell trade, though, was getting Yorkis Perez.
True. Because you really haven't lived unless you've had one of the Perez brothers.
Turk and Yorkis for Damon Berryhill and Mike Bilecki.
There it is. Yeah. All right. Yeah, Damon Berryhill.
That was around the time, the Cubs made several trades with the Braves. And that.
That's what I said. Right.
Yeah.
He's one in a long line of Joey Nation, Ruby Cavado,
Mitre, who we don't speak of.
No, we do not.
We do not. Markevius, Mingo. We don't talk 100%. About him with the Bears.
Let's get back on topic.
We don't talk about Sergio Mitre.
But we will talk about Andy Pratt.
Don't Google him at work.
No, But we will talk about Andy Pratt, and it's more than that too. There's like 7 different trades, and they all. I mean, Jason. No, that's. I'll leave it at that. But
and that was so that was the illustrious Steve Stone quote: "If the Braves call and offer you a pitcher, hang up."
Yeah, and so Wendell is actually, I guess, he turned out to be somewhat effective for 3 or 4 years before, getting traded. He made it all the way through 97.
That trade,
a bit of a staple.
We could do a remember this crap, an entire episode just about that trade.
Which trade?
The trade that sent Turk to the Mets.
We already hashed it out though. There's all kinds of crazy shit. You never see that type of a trade after it was a post waiver trade.
Now you can't do it. You can't do post waiver trades. But it's really amazing that with the amount of talent in this trade that they all got through waivers.
Yeah.
Brian McRae, Turk Wendell, Mel Rojas, Mark Clark, Manny Alexander, and Lance Johnson.
All recognizable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and there was an art to getting guys through. There was there were 2 schools of thought. Number one, you just put everybody on waivers at once. Just overwhelmed As soon as you saw that the waiver wire was starting to fill up, you took anybody on your team because you could always pull them back, and teams would put their entire roster on
That's
waivers
right.
just to confuse everybody about who they were really trying to sneak through. Because if somebody claimed him, you could pull him back, and this actually gets back to the Randy Myers thing because he wasn't a 98 Cub. The reason we talked about him in the 98 thing was
He was
the Blue Jays put him on waivers. He was at the end of his career, and they owed him a shitload of money, and they're like, I wonder if somebody will take him.
Padres already had Trevor Hoffman.
And the Padres were obsessed with the fact that the Dodgers were going to get him. And they claimed him, and they were like, okay, we'll claim him. The Blue Jays will pull him back, and then nobody can get him. And the Blue Jays were like, you can have him.
That's right.
And the Padres were like, oh, shit. We don't want to pay him. Like, well, you're going to have to.
Yep. That's a good point. Yeah, it was a whole different tableau.
I don't know why they don't still do waiver trades. I don't get it.
Well, they do still do. They don't at all now.
No, no. The only you can trade guys in like now. You could do a trade, but you can only trade players that aren't on your 40-man roster.
Got it. Wow.
You can no longer there's no longer revocable trade waivers. So the only way you could trade somebody, the Cubs could do this. If there was a team that wanted Frank, they could designate him or they could drop him from the 40-man because he has options.
Right.
Once he clears waivers, then they could trade him to another team for someone who's not on that team's 40-man roster. So you could still sneak the White Sox, I would guess, are frantically looking for a shortstop. And that's the only kind of shortstop they're going to be able to get is somebody who's not on a 40-man because they don't have Tim Anderson for 6 weeks. So
they could have Nick Madrigal again.
Well, no, the guy they can get, they can have Andrelton Simmons.
Oh yeah.
And I have a feeling, I'm just guessing that they will.
Ooh, hey, the Schadenfreude's going to start getting
and Tony will play him because it's Tony, and he'll remember his name. It's just like Dusty playing Ramon Martinez. I know this guy. I'll just play him.
Yeah, but even Dusty didn't go to Ramon every day.
Yeah, he went to him a lot. Got to play my guys.
Yeah, he did go a lot. So I know a lot of times you dig up draft picks without looking it up. Can you tell me who Larry Himes and the Cubs drafted in 1993? I'm pretty sure I can. He would end up. The Cubs drafted him as an outfielder, and he would end up pitching against the Cubs. Yeah,
Brooks Keefe.
Right? 1993 first-round draft pick. That's the other thing. Like Larry Himes, all right, so, in addition to burning bridges, insulting the earth, and doing nothing to turn the organization around, couldn't even replicate the success in which he was hanging his hat, which I already mentioned about those first-round picks, which, it was Jack McDowell and Alex Fernandez and Robin Ventura. And I think he also drafted Ray Durham in his last draft in 91, who turned out to be a good player. His two drafts for the Cubs or three, but was it the Kenny Steenstra was one, but Brooks was definitely 93.
Well, I mean, I'll give I'm going to give Larry I'm going to give him a pass here. The Cubs had the 10th pick in the draft, and they took Brooks Kieschnick. And there really wasn't anybody good that went after him in the whole first round. For example, the Astros with the 12th pick, they had to take some guy named Billy Wagner.
Oh, poor thing.
The Padres picked 14th, and they took a guy who was going to go play basketball at the University of North Carolina. They took Derek Lee. Whatever happened to that guy?
Oh, man.
The Blue Jays took a guy who would eventually win a Cy Young for the Cardinals, Chris Carpenter. Cardinals took Alan Bennis. Well, the Cubs ended up with him.
Yeah.
The last pick of the regular part of the first round, the Twins took a guy named Torrey Hunter.
Wow, there's the center fielder we could have used.
Yeah. Jason Varitek. Jeff D'Amico
good ball
went
player.
to the Brewers.
I remember Jeff D'Amico.
But the Cubs had another pick. The Cubs had a pick from one of their free agents. Oh, it's the Greag Maddux pick. So that's the thing with the Maddux thing. You have to factor all of it in. Why it's such a brilliant move by the Cubs.
Another draft pick. Yep.
They got Jose Guzman with that money. They got Randy Myers with that money. They got Willie Wilson. They got Dan Plesac. And then they drafted John Ratliff. It all worked out for him. Great.
It's a win-win.
The Cubs also had the 29th pick, and they took Kevin Ory. Oh, this is star-studded.
It's a cavalcade of stars, is what it is.
I do love looking at the drafts. So then he would have also picked 94. Which
He
stud,
did. So who was it?
which
Jace
studs
Peterson?
did we get in 94? We get Kenny Steenstra, right?
Okay.
Well, the Cubs had a winning
So,
record, so they had a much lower pick. That's a problem.
oh yeah. See.
Oh, yeah, Jay Peterson.
Jay Peterson. I almost said
Um,
Jace.
he was picked just 3 picks behind some guy. I don't know if he made it or not in the big leagues. Nomar Garciaparra.
Ouch. He was a rookie of the year in
So how about
3
that?
years.
Let's save the season for let's save Jim Lefebvre's job. Cost the Cubs Nomar Garciaparra the first time.
Like they would have drafted him.
No, they would have still taken Jay Peterson, I'm sure, from East Denver High School. Let's see, guys that went after Jay Peterson include, this is not so great. Terrence Long, Hiram Bocachica.
I remember Hiram Boca
Scott
Chica.
Ellerton.
Means lady's mouth. Girl's mouth.
That's about it. This was not a great draft.
94.
94. Paul Wilson was the first overall pick, best known for being body slammed by Kyle Farnsworth.
Also give up that homer to Sammy Sosa in 96 that I talked about.
Ben Greave, who ended up playing for the Cubs.
98 Rookie of the Year, along with
second
Kerry
overall
Wood.
pick. Dustin Hermanson was third. Antoine Williamson.
Future Cub.
Josh Booty.
Josh Booty.
Went fifth to the Marlins. McKay Christensen. The first, I guess Ben Grieve was not a bad major leaguer. He was rookie of the year.
No.
Todd Walker, who would also play for the Cubs, was the 8th overall pick by the Twins. C.J. Nitkowski.
Wait, in what position was Todd Walker drafted at?
I mean, what? Second base.
Yeah, which is rare. Shows you how much of a 2 left foot middle infielder he was, because most second basemen are drafted as shortstops, right?
So the best run were the picks from were 12, 13, and 14. Red Sox, Dodgers, and Mariners took in a row Nomar Paul Konerko, because he was a catcher for the Dodgers. He had a bad hip. They had to turn him into a first baseman, trade him to the Reds. And they got traded to the White Sox. And then Jason Varitek, who would actually sign this time, but eventually get traded to the Red Sox. So did Larry do that? Was he still around for 95?
No, that was McPhail's. Lynch drafted Kerry Wood. That was his first pick.
That's right, Kerry Wood.
I would be speaking of prospects. The Cubs did call up an outfielder that seemed to be one in a line of corner outfielders that we would always get our hopes up for.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
And he did hit a big homer that tied a game, and I'm not going to even bother to find it because we're not going to waste our time on the exploits of Kevin Robertson.
Kevin Robertson, good old number 19.
So they had that was around the Brooks Kieschnick, and I think Doug Jennings was in the 93 Cubs.
Yep.
Most Cubs fans remember Robin Jennings and Ozzie Timmons and Scott Bullitt and
Eddie Zambrano.
And Brant Brown, corner outfield. They just would continue to but Roberson, for a brief period of time, we don't know where he came from or who drafted him. Probably a Jim Fry pick, which should have been the first clue. But he looked like a good baller. He was a tall, thin, sort of muscular, angular African American. He looked like a ball player, but just another.
He's from Decatur. Went to Parkland Community College in Champaign.
I know Parkland. So he's downstate guy.
16th round draft pick in 88.
Jim Fry's first draft. So yeah. So, I mean, it's the only year. I don't think Kevin Roberson was on the Cubs in any other season except 93. He may have come back up in 94.
So, what did we say? Derek May hit 52 homers and 2,200 at-bats.
Okay.
Kevin Roberson hit 20 homers and 300 at-bats.
Oof.
He also only hit 197.
You know what I remember? He did tie a game. I might find it, but if I don't, no big deal. And he did play 94 and 95. I don't even remember that. I just thought it was 93. He tied a game up with an 8th or 9th inning homer, and now it comes back to me because Harry used the old line that they are. It shouldn't be hard to find because he only hit 20. But anyway, tied a game up at Wrigley Field, hit one down to Sheffield. It was like an overcast, rainy summer day, and that Harry was telling everybody that they were dancing in the streets of Decatur, as he was wont to do.
Heathcliff Slocum was still around in 93. William Brennan, not Walter Brennan, but William Brennan.
Was he the guy that designed the whole Chicago numbering system? I think so. Street numbering system.
Well, at least he did something. He played on the 88 Dodgers.
Wow. With Tim Belcher?
Let's see. He pitched in the 88. Pitched in 4 games for the 88 Dodgers. He was surprising he was not on the playoff roster. And then he pitched in 8 games for the Cubs in 93. Those were his only 2 seasons in the big leagues. No idea who that guy was. Number 44.
Me neither. Yeah, I'm starting to wonder if my Kevin Roberson clutch homer was just a figment of my imagination. Very well could have been. So we'll just have to leave it at that. They might have been dancing in the streets of Decatur, but for entirely different reasons.
So when Steve Lake came back to the Cubs for the second time, he got to be one of the guys who wore number 10 before they retired it.
Oh, you're kidding.
He had been 16 the first time around.
Another Leon Durham wannabe. Yeah, I could have guessed.
But Jose Vizcaíno was 16, so he couldn't have it.
Yeah, not with his hot start. No, sir.
He was starting second baseman.
Yeah.
So you can't have no. Get your own number. I don't care. I got 16. I love it. It's my favorite number.
Yeah. Like I said, at least until Rhino comes back. Yeah, I must have dreamed Kevin Roberson's supposed game time homer. Sorry, Kev, I tried. Thought you had your moment, but at least we got your name checked because I don't think your name has not come up before. We've already done 94, 95. So,
all right. Well, that's more than the 93 Cubs deserved, I think.
It's more than a lot of these teams deserve. But yeah, I think we picked it over pretty good. So
should have been all Rick Wilkins. He led the team in WAR. It's a legitimately good season, especially after
it really is.
Dove in and saw that it was not a matter of he only got hits when there was nobody on.
He
got hits when there were guys on. There just never anybody on.
I expected the whole thing to be a mirage and like proof that he was a fraud. And yeah, the 30 homers, 73 RBIs is not anywhere near his fault, like you said. And that's one of the finest seasons by any fucking catcher ever, let alone a Cub. It's just the most bizarre thing because nothing happened really before or after that would engender optimism. So it's quite a takeaway.
Yeah.
So, well, all right.
All right.
Well, thanks, Andy.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike.
Many of us have herpes,